Welcome to the Northeast Divide podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Steve Caldwell, who has very kindly decided that he's going to spend some of his Tuesday afternoon where he is, or Tuesday evening where we are, and we're going to talk about Sunderland's season. But before we get into that, and of course I've got Anth with me as always on this one as well. Steve, I'd like to kind of go in a little bit into your career before we start. So, how do you, looking back on your career, because you've got this really unique position of like kind of growing up through Newcastle's academy, going on to captain Sunderland, and then obviously your career's kind of changed after football. Well, after playing football, I suppose. So, give us a bit of an overview of how you reflect on like your time at Newcastle and Sunderland, first of all.
First of all, thanks, guys, John, Anth, for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Honoured to be on the podcast. I guess, like, starting by probably saying that I'm very, very proud to have represented both clubs. I always say I'm probably one of the few truly impartial people about Northeast football. Like, I love both teams just the same. I had great success and really strong memories for both clubs and both sets of supporters, and kind of everything about football in the Northeast is what I'm about. Actually, even as I speak about it now, I'm 43 years old. I haven't played for either club for decades plus, and the hairs in the back of my neck stand up because it's such a great place to play football. People love you, people respect you, people see that you're trying to give your all, whether you're the best player that the club's ever had or the worst. If you give your best for Newcastle and Sunderland, they'll appreciate it. And that's why I think that I probably had, quite a successful spell with both clubs, even although Newcastle was a longer period but shorter on the first team because I came through the youth ranks. And Sunderland, we had extreme success and sort of like really abject failure in the Premier League. I still think back very fondly of that memory as well. I was leaving school. I was really wanting to play in England. I felt like the Premier League was a place to be. I was lucky enough to be recruited by a lot of teams throughout England and Scotland. And Newcastle was the first English club I ever went to. I think I was 13, and I was down there with a few Scottish boys, and something about the magic of the Northeast, St James's Park, the club just captivated me. And we stayed at an old guest house with an old army colonel, and he was a great guy, and he'd share stories with us. He'd tell us about the history of the club and, the magic in Newcastle United. And I think he's probably the best recruitment tool Newcastle ever had in terms of me at that time, because I just had that feeling that this was a place for me. Went on to Man United and Chelsea and other places, and I just kept coming back to I want to sign for Newcastle. So I left school, signed for Newcastle, and had an amazing, what would that have been? Probably full time, like 7 years, but kind of involved with the youth teams probably 8 or 9. And a great club, fought hard to get in the first team, experienced a 4th place, a 3rd place, and a 5th place finish in my kind of first team years, and under Sir Bobby Robson, where I learned a great deal about football and about life, and then decided I want to play first team football. And that was as clear as that. I knew I was never going to be a regular at Newcastle. I think I probably could have stayed there years and years playing 10, 15 games a year, but I wanted to be considered a really vital member of a team. And I looked around and figured it was lower Prem, high Championship was probably my level, and got a few offers, one of the offers being Mick McCarthy in Sunderland. So, I wasn't an idiot. I was well aware of the moving, 12 miles, across the water was going to be pretty controversial. But I really wanted to play in that area. I love living in that area. And I moved a few different places in the Northeast, but I love the Northeast. I love living in the Northeast, and Sunderland was a huge club, and I thought it was a great club, a club that was destined to go back to the Premier League. And so I made that move, and I went with Mick and Sunderland, and I don't regret it one little bit. It was a great transition for my career.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic to hear that. Anth, your memories of Steve as a footballer?
Oh, I've got one good one, and my son has as well. Saturday, the 23rd of April, excuse me, 2005. I took my son to his first ever Sunderland match, Steve, and little did I know that he got bitten by the bug, because up until that point he was turning up with Manchester City tops on and Arsenal tops on. When you're young, I think he was 6 years old. It's a case of, you're not quite sure where your allegiance lies until you get bit by the Sunderland bug. So I took him to the Stadium of Light. We beat Leicester 2-1. You scored the winner, and we got promoted. And it was a majestic afternoon. And my son still remembers that day and talks about it. So thank you for that memory. It was a very special memory. So yeah, I'll always remember that goal you scored. Fantastic.
Amazing. Yeah, great day. I remember it. Obviously, remember it as well. And so tense. We were in a 3-horse race that year, weren't we? Ipswich and Wigan, and it was tight all the way. And then we just came good when it mattered most. And anybody could have got the goal, but I'm really proud that I never got that many goals in my career. So to get such an important one was amazing.
I can quite imagine it. It wasn't quite the same memory for myself, but we'll not go into that. I think moving on. So Steve, just give a bit of our listeners a bit of an overview of kind of what you're up to now, away from England and the UK altogether, I suppose.
Yeah, I was. I went to Burnley. Had a good time at Burnley. Had a year at Wigan, and then I went to Birmingham for a couple of years in the Championship. We just got relegated, tried to get us promoted, had a Europa League campaign. Second season wasn't so good under Lee Clark, unfortunately. Lee was a guy I knew really well, but it just never worked out. We lost Chris Hughton, got Lee Clark, a lot of new North East connections there. And I was like needing a fresh challenge. I was leaving Birmingham. We were reducing wages and that again, and I was ready for someone else. And I got a call to potentially go to MLS, to Toronto FC. And it was like an 8-week loan to start with. So there was a kind of get out clause for the club and for me. And I thought, well, we'll try it. I'll give it a go. I'll see how it develops. And I came across to Toronto right at the end of the Championship season. So I never really had a break, right into MLS. Pretty much loved it for the first minute that I got here. Great city, great people, growing league. A club in need of my type of personality, I think, at the time. Needed a kind of older leader, someone who could nurture some of the young guys and help shape a club to give it some values and some sort of structure. So it was the right time. It was a club that I'd had very limited success, well, no success, I got to say, before I got there. And I think with the addition of myself and some others that came after, we sort of like set the club up a little bit for the success that came. And I just had a brilliant time. I could only play about a year and a half, 2 years, I think I lasted, but I got some Achilles problems and stuff. So I decided to retire and move into the business side of football, or soccer as they call it here. And it was such a surprise to get that opportunity, because I never thought that. I always thought I'd just become a coach and then potentially a manager, and the usual pathway that most players that have kind of had leadership roles in their playing career go down. But there was a really great guy, a mentor of mine called Tim Lywicki, and probably the most famous thing he's done in football is he signed David Beckham to the LA Galaxy. Tim was the architect of that. So he is a guy who's a tremendous sports executive in North America. He saw potential in me to kind of move to the business side of sports and become potentially one day a general manager or a president of a football club in North America. So it just, I say overnight, it probably took 2 or 3 weeks, but he just changed my whole mindset. I thought, he's a very persuasive guy, Tim. If anyone that's ever lucky enough to meet him that might be listening to this will know what I'm talking about. He's just a unique guy. When he wants something and he believes in something, he just sells it to you in a way that you're in there, and so he said, try this, move into the business side. We'll teach you the ropes. You'll kind of learn how to function, and then at the right time we'll move you back to the football. So I started that role, and unfortunately he left. The caveat was he was leaving to go back to California. So I kind of lost my mentor, which might have meant different path, but ultimately I learned a lot about business. a lot about sponsorship and ticket sales and all the key ingredients that go into running a football club or a sports club. At that time, it was a little bit more general because the company also owns Toronto Maple Leafs, the hockey team, and the Toronto Raptors, the basketball team. So I got to see other sides of sports, and it sort of set me up on this like business pathway, you know, which I've really enjoyed. I run a business. I run a sports technology business called Best Athletes. I'm the CEO, so I enjoy that. It's a smaller startup, but I'm learning all the time there. I've had another kind of athlete transition startup that I founded with a couple of other guys, and it's gave me some other time to do my primary job. So I'm talking about all that business stuff, but really my primary role here in Canada is on television. I work for a company called TSN, where I do World Cups and Euros and MLS, and used to do Premier League, Champions League as well, but we lost the properties. And so I love the TV side. I enjoy having different things to kind of think about and worry about during the week, which really keeps my mind sharp. And I've coached a bit with Canada as well. So I've worn many hats, and I think I've kind of come into a position where I enjoy the diversity, learning about these different things, put myself in uncomfortable situations so that one day I can say, right, this is it. And I might focus on one, or I might just always have the different options. But it's been a great journey. 11 years, just past, what date are we on the day? 14th. Actually, 11 years yesterday I came to Canada, 13th of May. I came for 8 weeks, and I'm here 11 years and 1 day later, so I must like it.
Amazing. That's it. It's amazing how life can sometimes go that way. Right. I did promise Anth that this was going to be a fairly exclusive Sunderland podcast. Because normally, obviously, we do the divide. But it's been great kind of hearing from you, Steve, and you kind of catching up with kind of where you are now. Right. So let's talk about Sunderland season, Anth. I know you've been dying to talk about this. What were your expectations going into the season realistically? And kind of on reflection, how's that panned out, do you think, overall?
Oh, well, based on last season, again, I'm going to use the term overachieved, because we did, didn't we? So I think expectations were high. I think that a lot of supporters' expectations were high. I expected a lot more, because the start of the season, we didn't set the world alight, but then obviously the 5-0 win against Southampton, which was my highlight, sort of got things moving. And I thought, yeah, under Mowbray, I thought we were going to go places. And then obviously whatever's happened behind the scenes with regards to, I don't know, the model, etc., if he was expecting a little bit more with regards to maybe his investment money-wise, or whatever promises were made. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. When he left, it left a sour taste in the mouth the way he left. And, after that, I mean, I can go into a lot of things with regards to what happened after that. But my expectations were maybe he's pushed for the playoffs. And to be honest with you, I would have been happy with mid-table, because, it's only our second season back, and just to consolidate, because, again, we did overachieve the previous season. But then I think, is it a missed opportunity when I look at what Ipswich Town did? Came up from League One, and then they've obviously just made the way up to the Premiership, and best of luck to them. They fully deserve it. And could we have done the same with a bit more momentum and a bit more investment, a bit more tweaking of the model, some experienced players? But I guess we'll never know. So yeah, I'm happy that we're still in the Championship, and I'm just hoping that we prepare well for next season, because we need to get a manager in as soon as possible and build from there, basically.
Thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I probably echo a lot of Anth's opinion there, in terms of a little disappointed. I thought, I don't see every game in the Championship, so I have to be clear on that. But obviously I follow it, and I certainly follow my old clubs, Sunderland being one of them. And I was lucky enough to be in the North East last season for a game against Middlesbrough for Sky Sports, and I was just so impressed with just the positive sentiment, the performance, the type of performance it was. Watched Sunderland a lot beyond that, and into the playoffs with my kids. We were all excited about the team, and And then I know they overachieved, but just felt like there would be a kick on from that into the next season, and really felt like what Tony Mowbray was getting at the young players was significant, and he was the guy. And no doubt in my mind that Tony Mowbray was the one to take the boys forward. And then when that went sour and he left, it was just confusion, and I just saw dysfunction then, which was unfortunate because it felt like there was real building and momentum towards something. And when Tony Mowbray left, the whole plan was out the window, and everything was just off the cuff. So disappointing again. I was there again in January for the cup game, and I saw a totally different team. I know they were playing against an excellent side, and Newcastle were good on the day, but I did not see the same energy and the same kind of buzz on the pitch what I'd seen a year before. So a tough year. They've got to get a good manager and the best manager they can get, and give the guy time, give the guy a platform. We've seen Arsenal, we could go on and on. The teams that get the managers that get 2 or 3 years, that they allow them to build window after window. Usually by years, 1.5, 2, 3, we're starting to see like the real team that person wants. So you got to get the recruitment right in the first place and make sure you get the right guy. But hopefully this summer will mean that the right guy will come in, and then there'll be some money there for him to go get the kind of players that he wants.
Yeah, and I think from a different perspective, I mean, I look in and I think they did scrape into the playoffs last season. And then that, obviously didn't quite go the way they wanted it to against Luton, and obviously Luton took advantage of that and got promoted. And going into this season, it almost felt like the noises coming out of the club were that they were very much kind of, good in for promotion. But I don't think that's kind of what you saw in terms of what they've kind of put in. And we've talked about this a little bit, Steve, about the model and about how, look, and I relate it back to Newcastle, right? And I think about what Mike Ashley's model was, and it was very much about, we need to make sure we break even. We need to make sure when we buy players they're young and what have you. But if you don't have some experienced heads in there, then you're not going to be in a position where you can mount a serious challenge. And I think you're right. I think Mowbray was doing a fantastic job with what he had, and I think ultimately, reading between the lines, something's obviously gone on behind the scenes, and he's gone, "No, I've had enough of this," and he's walked. And it's a shame, really, because he was providing something. I think the other thing is, I think the club thought they had Will still in the bag. Now we'll see what happens with that because he's now available. But I think they thought that was sorted. It didn't happen. So then they ended up bringing Mick Beale in. And that was just a car crash. The fans were never on board with him, and we were saying that there was weeks where he'd have like a couple of wins, and we just kept saying, just wait, there'll be another loss, and then it's a disaster again. And it's only a matter of time before he goes. And I think there's just been that instability. But you're right about the derby, because look, let's remember Newcastle went in that game worst form they'd had for months and months. Like, we went in, and I think from the 7th of December onwards, we were on this horrendous run. We'd lost at Everton, we'd lost at Spurs. We beat Fulham, but we were terrible that day. But we got the result we needed. We lost at Luton. We lost at home to Forest on Boxing Day. We just had this horrendous run, and that's about when we started the podcast up. It was just before the derby, and I said to Anth, look, this is probably, and I said, I might be jinxing you here, right? I said, but you're playing us at the best possible time, because all the momentum's going one way. And actually, I think Sunderland had recently beaten Hull away at was it Boxing Day's beat Hull away from home. And I just thought, they've got the form here. Like, there's a real potential for an upset. And on the day, it was men against boys. They were never in it. And I mean, Jack Clark had been talked up as he was going to really cause us trouble. And I've said a few times that was his audition for the Premier League teams. He fluffed his lines. He just wasn't there that day. And I think, I'm not going to choose the low light for your Anth, but I'm assuming that day is probably up there this season as your low light.
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, like you say, it was men against boys, and we didn't turn up. We were expecting a bit more, I suppose. I mean, I'm a realist. I was expecting us to get beat, but not in the manner that we got beat. But to me, I mean, that was a low light as such. But I think also the Hume handshake with Beale, or the handshake that didn't occur at Birmingham, that was just embarrassing. And I thought, is that where we are as a club at the moment? Because I have no hesitation in saying that Beale did see him, and I just thought, you know,
100%.
and yeah, I just thought, you know, it's just really childish. And like you said, with regards to Beale, the knives were always out from it all. It only took one loss, regardless of the results before that, for the knives to be out. He was never going to have the backing of the supporters. So yeah, the Newcastle result was a low as such, but just the whole Beale appointment, and you know, I don't wish him any ill will. I just think, you know, it was the wrong man at the wrong time that was appointed.
It's so interesting how some guys just don't get Sunderland or Newcastle. You know, they just don't get what actually matters, and how they can tap into the energy of the cities and the clubs and the history and that. And I think Beale was one of the guys, wasn't he? You know, there was so many little incidents, even his tactics on that day. And I know he's playing against a team that are better in quality for sure, but it was just so passive and like standing back. You know, you had 40-odd thousand, nearly 50,000 people wishing that they would just step onto Newcastle and have a go. Even if they lost the game doing that, everyone would have been happier, you know, by the mentality. And I just think when I came away from Stadium like that day, I was like, this guy's got no chance. Like, he doesn't get it. You kind of see it quickly. I've been in the Northeast a long time, been away for a while, but, you know, grew up there essentially. It's my home. I just thought this guy's just not going to work for him, you know, and he might go on to have a better career somewhere else. Players have done it. They've came through Newcastle or Sunderland, and they've went and had great careers in Europe or elsewhere, but they just don't get it in the Northeast. And he was one of the managers. So that's what makes the next guy so important, you know, and that's what has made Eddie Howe so successful, that he steps into his environment and just got it right away, got the type of football that was needed, and, you know, got the crowd on board. Everyone was excited. Yes, his timing was fortunate, and it was a good time to come in there. But I don't think it's a bad time to come in at Sunderland for someone. I think it's a time where you might not have the resources in terms of the money, but it's still a club for me that's very attractive to a buyer, or to at least someone who'll come and invest some money for a large part of the club. So, yeah, getting the right guy, if it is going to be Will Stills, he's going to have to understand what makes players tick and what makes the fans tick in this area if he's going to be good.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think the thing that I know I promised a Sunderland podcast answer, so I apologise. But the thing about Eddie Howe when he came in is he came in at a time when the club was united again, where the ownership had come in. There was a lot of hope, and yes, expectation comes with that, but there was a lot of hope among the fan base, and he tapped into that, and he realised actually the way that we're going to be successful is we're all going to like band in together. And you're right, Steve, right? The potential is there, isn't it? You know, they've got basically everything is Premier League apart from maybe the players on the pitch and the division that they're in. And I think once you start to fix some of those things, all of a sudden, you know, they've got, you know, I mean, the training ground's excellent, you know, it's, you know, their academy and everything else. Their academy's been light years ahead of Newcastle's for many years, and they've produced better talent for many years, and that's somewhere where Newcastle have to catch up. So, you know, there's a foundation of light, I suppose, but there is, you know, and I think ultimately, you're right. Somebody could come in and invest, or they could get the right coaching and you know, get back in the league, and they'd have a chance of maybe stopping up. And I suppose it's about how you do that this day and age with the vast difference in money. And I think, look, 30 points will have you safe in the Premier League this year, which shows you how big the gap is now. With those three promoted clubs that came back down, it's how they deal with that, I suppose, isn't it?
You see the spending of the clubs. Sorry to interrupt, but you see the spending
go for it.
Of the clubs. It's like, what did Leicester spend? Was it 62 million on wages or something? It's like ridiculous compared to. I mean, Ipswich got up though, and they weren't spending too much money, you know. So it is possible, but I think like the gaps there in terms of spending. And the last point I'll make on the Championship, from my experiences there, nobody gets promoted out of the Championship without experience somewhere in the team, usually in the spine of the team. So I get it. The models to bring young players through, potentially sell them on, or make them become stars at Sunderland, but you're still going to put in 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are in there, that are experienced, that have been there, done it, know what it takes to progress these young guys and to achieve success. So I think they're going to have to tweak the model.
Yeah. I'm in total agreement with you there. Absolutely. Anth, anything you want to add on that?
I 100% agree with that with regards to the model need tweaking. When I look at, obviously, Corey Evans is gone, and I'm thinking you've got the likes of Dan Neil, who's now classed as sort of a seasoned player at Sunderland, as in he's got a lot of appearances under his belt, and but he's still very young, and we can't expect miracles. And obviously there's clubs circling, apparently the vultures are circling for the likes of him, your Pattersons, your Ballards, your Equas to a certain extent, and Rigg. And yeah, I just hope we can hang on to the core of those and get some experience in. Like Steve said, it's vital at that level, vital.
Yeah, someone like Chris Rigg, you need to try and hold on to as long as you can, really, because surely as part of the model, like he's the kind of player you want to keep on progress and then sell when he's much better, if that's what's going to happen, unless he can, get to a point where you'd want to kind of have a team built around him. So yeah, totally agree with you on that. Anth, who's your player of the season? I know it's 16th was a disappointing finish, but from that, player of the season for you?
Do you know what? I know everyone's going to go on about Jack Clark with regards to his goals, his assists, and I know he's out injured for a period of time. Where would we have been without his goals, without his assists? Obviously, we wouldn't have. Who knows? Towards the end of the season, when our form dipped alarmingly so, we mightn't have survived. So I was going to say Jack Clark, but for me, it was a toss up between Hume or Ballard. I think Ballard has been an absolute colossus in central defence, and I really hope he doesn't go. I think he's got good leadership qualities, and I think him and Hume at the back could form a spine if we can hang on to them next season. So it was between Ballard and Hume, but I'm going to go for Ballard. I know against Newcastle in the FA Cup, he did what he did in few sort of lapses of concentration, but he's some player, and in the air he's pretty much been unbeatable at Championship level, pretty much unbeatable.
Yeah, and Ballard, like, that's no mean feat, is it, to be that good at Championship level in the air? Like, it shows you your top. I like Ballard. I like him a lot. I think he's got more to come as well. I do think, again, probably putting somebody a bit more seasoned next to him might bring out more in him. Allow him just a little bit of breathing space to grow. I still see him as young, personally. He's still got a bit to go. Jack Clark's obviously a talent. He's a little one-dimensional for me. Like, he has to vary his game up. It's always the same kind of thing, and he's very talented at it. But can he do that at the higher level of Premier League? I don't know. I think he's going to have to put another couple of strings to his bow when it comes to his play off that side, and sort of pick up some other areas potentially on the field where he can be dangerous. I like the goalkeeper. I like Anthony Patterson. I think he's, again, I gotta qualify this by saying I have not watched every Sunderland game this season, but he's a guy that I really like. I think he's got big potential. I always think he looks composed in the goals, and I do think that if you got a good solid defence in front of him, he could really flourish and become a player that's excellent for Sunderland, and might either have a great career at Sunderland or go on to bigger things, a bit like Pickford's done, where he's went from strength to strength, and he's out now England #1 and maybe the most consistent goalie in the Premier League this year. When you think about the defence he's got and where his team are in the league, he's been brilliant. So I'm going to go for Patterson. He's probably my kind of favourite player at the minute, and someone who could get better and better.
I think both great shouts. I think Ballard's a really interesting one because I've only really watched the one Sunderland game properly this year. I'll be honest. But actually, in that game, with the exceptions of the mistakes he made, and they were big mistakes, right? Because they ultimately cost you goals. But with the exception of that, I thought actually he played really well. He was the only one that really kind of stuck out. I thought Pritchard had that one chance But I think it's very difficult to give him player of the season given the way that he left. But no, I think, you know, and I think the point about Patterson's a really good one. You know, I've again, from what I've seen, you know, he looks to have a bit of a presence about him as well. You can almost see him in that kind of that physical mold as well, which is even more important, certainly in that particular position, of course. All right, Anth. So I'm going to a bit of a split question, this one. So what's your realistic target and ambitions for next season? Or where do you actually think you'll end up finishing?
Do you know what? I haven't got a Scooby because it just all depends for me on who we get in, how quickly we can get them in, how quickly they can get their ideas across to whatever players they're going to have at their disposal. And it needs to be quick. Obviously, some of the names being rumoured, bandied around, you know, again, the will still, etc. There's some good names in there, but I think there's going to be a lot of competition for those managers, possibly, who knows, at a higher level. So to me, I would love to see us push for the playoffs after seeing what Ipswich did the season gone, how they performed on, you know, a pretty limited budget coming up from League One. I think we're pretty much established in the Championship after 2 seasons. I think there is stability there, and again, it just all depends. We've said it, tweaking this model, getting the experience in. I would like to see us push for the playoffs, but realistically, I don't know. I possibly fall a bit short, but we can't lose heart. Like Steve said earlier, you know, you've got to get a manager in and give them time, and once they have that time, they'll instill their playing methods and get the players playing for them. They'll know how the manager wants them to play, and we need to build from there. And we are an impatient lot in the northeast of England, both Newcastle and Sunderland supporters, and we do get a little bit excitable sometimes, and sometimes we get a little bit carried away. And you know, it's that enthusiasm is brilliant, you know, and the atmosphere is always amazing at Sunderland games, Newcastle games, and you know, very vocal and a very loyal support, big crowds. But we need to be realistic with our aims and ambitions, and just you know, stick by the team. And I think we have done to a certain extent. I know when Bale was in charge, the naysayers were out. There was some boos. I don't think that benefits the players. I think, you know, the young players, and hopefully if we do bring that experience in, they'll push on. And so at a push, playoffs. If not, I won't be upset. But hopefully we'll push for it.
Playoffs for me. I mean, this is Sunderland. They've always got to strive for playoffs. Sunderland should be in the playoffs every year or on the edges of the playoffs. So I hope it's the same, you know. And again, there's too many unknowns to be confident about that, let's say. But that's got to be the aim. Can't be talking about mid-table Sunderland in the Championship. It's got to be trying to get up to the Premier League where they belong. I've always said this, it's the hardest and the best place to play football. If it's going great, it's amazing. You're walking on, you know, on air, you're floating around, you're getting carried everywhere. People are telling you how great you are. If you're losing games, people are telling you what you did wrong. I can only imagine what it's like for a manager. You know, tactics were wrong, this was wrong. Everywhere he goes, post office, bank, everywhere he goes, he's going to be getting it. So Sunderland need a special type of personality, someone that can handle that, someone that is patient, someone that can, you know, like we said earlier, like invigorate the fans, have them excited about the journey, you know, tell them to stick with the journey, with the team throughout the process, all this kind of stuff, which sounds like jargon some of the time, but that person's going to need that, because it's not going to be, I don't think they're necessarily going to kind of hit the ground running in August. I think it's going to be a slower start. If you get some new players in, it's going to take some time. He's going to want to change the way that the team plays. So it's going to be a slow process, a little bit like our season was under Mick way back in 2004, when we took a long time to get going. You know, we had a lot of new players, and we had Stephen Elliott, and we had Dean Whitehead, and we had Liam Lawrence, and we had all these new guys, myself, and we're trying to kind of integrate it in. But as we said before, not a harp on the same points, but we had Marcus Stewart, we had Gary Breen, we had Thomas Meyer or Mark Poom, We had these experienced guys, you know, who had been there and done it and got the T-shirt. So I think some of the signings are going to be young and exciting, and obviously guys with high potential. But Sunderland got to sign a couple of guys that are hardened seasoned pros that will help this team in the tough times, help his coach in the tough times to stick with the process and to believe in the process to get results.
That's it. And I think it's really telling, isn't it, that we were sat here in late January and we were talking about, you know, who could Sunderland possibly sign, and you'd mentioned how Kiefer Moore had been linked, and he's just got promoted with Ipswich. So look, fans, you know, although we, you know, very much amateurs in terms of the game and whatever else, but we understand sometimes we can look at a team and go, actually, we know what this needs. And I think, yeah, a little bit of tweaking in that model, then I think, yeah, Sunderland can get to a great place. I've really enjoyed this. I think it's been great. Steve, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thanks again, as always, for your time. Anyone who's watched, please like the video, say that you liked it. That will help us in terms of how we can grow. If you've listened on one of your apps, please make sure that you rate us. And if you've got any feedback, leave that on the apps. We're also on X and Instagram at Northeast Divide. So please leave us your feedback there. But thank you very much for joining us for this Sunderland season review with Steve Caldwell, our special guest. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. All the best.
Thank you
Cheers,
very much,
mate.
Steve. Thank you.